the first edition of the Nahar Jito Bookathon, presented in association with the Raisoni Foundation. In this session, brace yourselves to be transported back in time. Queen's Last Salute, the story of the Rani of Jhansi and the 1815-7 mutiny, a vivid and compelling historical account by Mopia Basu, which details the remarkable story of the Rani of Jhansi and the 1857 mutiny. Joining us today is Mopia Basu, a respected journalist and talented writer whose dedication to uncovering historical truths is evident in a lot of her acclaimed books. She has worked as a journalist with the Times of India, the Economic Times, the Indian Express, and Business Today. She has written on a variety of topics, including business, education, art, culture, and travel. Her debut book, Khoka, was published in 2015. Her books, The Queen's Last Salute, The Story of the Rani of Jhansi, and the 1857 Mutiny, and Anarkali and Salim, a retelling of Mughal-e-Azam, were bestsellers. Mopia believes that the objective of a historical fiction writer should be to bring alive certain aspects of history and not to change it. It is to present and enhance what's there and pull it out from the layers of obscurity. Our moderator for this session is a woman of many passions. A surgeon by profession and a writer by heart and a seeker in spirit, Dr. Pooja writes under the pseudonym of Pure Heart and is forever in flight on the wings of imagination, on the journey of self-discovery, riding the waves of change. She thrives on books, on chai, on philosophizing the universe and universalizing philosophy. She has been writing since she was 8, dabbling in various forms of crafts, words, and verses. Her poems and short stories have found their place in various magazines and anthologies. Her novels, Where There Is a Will, Dial T for Terror, and A Genre Called Hope, have received many rave reviews. Between writing prescriptions on one hand to stories on the other, she is now exploring the poetry of inner silence. I'd now like to hand over the session to our moderator.
So good afternoon, Mopia. How are you?
Good afternoon, Pooja. I'm very well and good to see you again.
Same here. And I'm so eagerly waiting for our conversation. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and I get to learn so much from you. So I just hope that our audience will also get to learn a lot, and especially the effort and the discipline that you put into your work. So tell us about your books, and especially the book that's chosen, The Queen's Last Salute. Can you tell us in brief what it is about?
Yes, but before that, Pooja, I'd like to, on the behalf of everyone in this country, I'd like to thank you for your immense contribution during COVID. Pooja, being a doctor, I know that you were at the forefront, and thank you so much. Because of doctors like you, we could, get through a period like that. So, I mean, really, really many thanks. It's an honor to be talking to you. And okay, so getting on with my book, The Queen's Last Salute. Well, this book was published by Juggernaut Books in 2019, and it's been almost 5 years since the book came out. And to be very honest, I started writing the book in 2010. I wrote for some time, and then I took a huge gap for personal, due to personal commitments. And it was when I returned to Orcha for a brief visit to be alone because my father had passed away, and I just wanted to spend some time alone. And I thought Orcha was the right place to go to because it is a very serene place, very holy place, and you can be on your own, sort of isolated from the world, kind of a thing. At least it was at that time. So I went back then. When I returned to Orcha, I realized that my work is incomplete. Has been left incomplete, and I think I should get on with it. Maybe it was a calling that was long overdue. So when I returned, my friend, actually an author friend, told me that what happened to that book of yours. So I said, it's just lying in the closet. So she said, get it out and get going. So that was when I started writing, and within a year I completed the book and got it published.
Great. And just to give the audience some perspective, this book is about the Rani of Jhansi, Rani Lakshmi Bai, and it's a historical fiction. And since, as you said, you started writing it in 2010, and it was finally released in 2019. And these challenges in life that came up, and then something came and got you to write it again, and that I mean that's because of that we could have this conversation that we are having. So I just wanted to know what made you think of a topic like this,
Okay,
of
so
writing about.
well, I would say that the cover can be a little misleading for some readers. In fact, they have said so, because the cover says Rani Lakshmibai, she's on a horse, a very famous image of hers, on a horse flashing a sword, and the tagline is the story of Rani Lakshmibai and the mutiny of 1857. Now, while some were disappointed that the book was not entirely centered upon Rani Lakshmibai, there were several people who actually were quite, I would say, delighted and were happy that the book did not talk about only Rani Lakshmibai. Because as you know, she is perhaps one of our most well-known and famous female warriors. Though most of our female warriors, known, unknown, have not really been documented. There have been a few, but very few have been really documented, while there were many. So she is somebody who is better known. There is a lot of material about her. People have written about her. There have been different aspects of her which have been covered. There have been different interpretations of her, and this is what I learned while the writing process was on. I learned a lot about her as an individual, as a person, as a ruler, as a mother, as a wife, and even as a diplomat, completely overshadowed by her image of, a warrior queen. And like her, so again, coming back to the point that the book is not entirely about her, it is more about her companion and, comrade in arms called Chandraki, who's a fictional character that I've created. She happens to be part of the Rani, her regiment of female soldiers. She came from a background of courtesans, and but she left that and decided to fight alongside Rani Lakshmibai during her freedom struggle. And I have presented Chandraki. In fact, I would say Chandraki is the heroine of my book, not much more than Rani Lakshmibai herself. So Chandraki is probably an archetype of all those unsung female warriors, who have sacrificed and contributed immensely to our freedom struggle. Most of them are not known. So you can say, there are a couple of companions of Lakshmibai that we have read about, like Jhalkari Bai and all. So this, my heroine is one of those, close companions of Rani Lakshmibai, who does not hesitate to go to any length for the sake of her motherland. So it was when your question was, what made me write this book, right? So it wasn't really Rani Lakshmibai who made me write this book, though she's a very prominent figure in the book. It was more because my husband, being in the army, he was posted in Jhansi at that time, and there was a beautiful town called Orchha, which was about 20 kilometers from Jhansi. I used to visit that place pretty often, and I found it really, really beautiful. Like I've said, I went back there later too. I found it very beautiful. It was a very holy place. It had lovely legends attached to it. There was a beautiful river flowing through it, when I saw the old palaces there, the old structures there, which still have a lot of frescoes and all, they're really beautiful. And there were so many stories that I heard of about Orchha, which is a relatively lesser known kingdom than Jhansi in its time, And Orchha's ruler, other than Raja Chhatrasar, who was probably its most famous ruler, was not as well known as Rani Lakshmibai was. But yet Orchha came, like Jhansi is a very barren kind of I wouldn't say barren, I would say rocky, a more stark landscape, and where it is more, green because of the river, probably. And also the fact that if you visit the two forts, one in Jhansi and one in Orcha, the Jhansi fort is very stark, very military. It was a military bastion, while the Orcha fort is far more embellished. It is far more beautiful, and you could make out that it was a palace for kings and queens. So when I returned from there, this place, to be honestly speaking, kept haunting me, and one day I just started writing about a story that formed in my head, and I was just the words freely flowed, and about 20% of the story was created. Thereafter, I couldn't visit Orcha for almost 5-6 years, and I had a lot of personal commitments in my life that time. So the book was on the back burner. I couldn't go back to the book. Then, like I said before, I went back there to seek solace. And that was when I revisited all those old places I had visited earlier. And that was when I started researching about Orcha. And when I started researching about Orcha, what I came across, I stumbled upon an event that, frankly, I had not read about in my history book, any of my history books. And this was about Orcha's attack on Jhansi during the what they call the revolt of 1857, and what we all prefer to call it as the First War of Independence. So when Jhansi was usurped by the British, and they sort of threw Lakshmibai out of Jhansi, took her throne, and she was very vulnerable at that point. She had nobody to really support her and help her. At that time, its neighboring kingdom, which was just 20 kilometers away, attacked her. Because there was a history to it, because Orcha always believed that Jhansi belonged to it. Today, of course, these two towns are in two different states. Orcha is in Madhya Pradesh and Jhansi is in UP. But Jhansi, at that time, it was part of the larger Bundelkhand, what we know as Bundelkhand. And so there are several legends there which are very beautiful. And if we have the time, I can talk about those. So I started doing this research, and I realized that Orcha was an ally of the British at the time of the 1857 war, and how they took advantage of Rani Lakshmibai at her weakest moment and attacked it. So then I researched as to why this happened. Why were these two neighboring kingdoms at war with each other, and what happened thereafter, what transpired thereafter. And I came back, and then the story was a little clearer in my mind, and that's how
the story that you were writing.
Yes, that was the basic background.
So I would you say that for yourself, the experience or the learning behind writing this entire book, the entire journey that you went through, was initially that of inspiration, where the book wrote itself to a certain degree. And thereafter, there was research, hard work, and discipline. So there's inspiration to begin with, and some form of, where the story writes itself, where it gets the better of the author, and the author learns from the story and the book. And thereafter, the author starts owning the story, then writes and devotes more time and discipline to it. So I think it's a very interesting story, because it shows just those two parts of, or the two aspects of book writing, where you cannot just stop, where the words just flow, and the others where there's so much of discipline, or there's so much of authenticity that must come, especially into historic fiction. And not just authenticity, but that accountability that one must have for the reader. So would you like to speak about that? What, according to you, should a person who's writing historical fiction, what should be his principles that bind him while he's writing?
Okay, so one is that being a student of literature really helped me, and I love fiction. I love stories. I love to tell stories. I love to read stories. A good story will always get the better of me. So if anybody who wants to write, there is a lot of difference between writing non-fiction or a narrative history, even narrative history and historical fiction. So the smallest of things can inspire you. The smallest of triggers can compel you. I would use the word compel because when that story developed, in the initial part, I was compelled. I don't know from where this girl came and where the antagonist, who is actually the male, I would say the male protagonist, who is actually an antagonist, how he developed as a character, how Rani Lakshmibai's character developed. Rani Lakshmibai's character, I had material to sift from, I had material to choose from. And why did I, sort of relegate Rani Lakshmibai to the background, But then I realized that that was when I was just forming the story. It was not just that. Like you said, the hard work came later, and that was real hard work because you cannot mess around with somebody like Rani Lakshmibai. You can't just write anything about her. It might be fiction, but she is an iconic figure. She is very relevant even today. And she had so many different aspects of her personality, which I had not read about or even known about, earlier. So I really researched about her. I read about her. I sort of read the various interpretations of her personality, of her and of her predicament as well, and the political situation at that time in Bundelkhand, the geopolitics of the area, and in the larger scheme of things, India was fighting its own battle with the British, and this was first time 1857, something like 1857 had happened, which was the landmark, a watershed in our freedom struggle. So it was not easy when it came to that part, because I couldn't deviate from the facts. When you're writing about somebody as compelling a figure as Rani Lakshmibai and as revered, not just, compelling the personality, she's practically revered, she's so many women look up to her as their, ideal woman, as their inspiration. So I cannot tamper with any facts about Rani Lakshmibai. Because for a many people in India, she is a representative of their lot and their aspirations. So that part I had to do a lot of research. Then the storyline was mine. As I created the story, I had to then do a lot of research about Orchha, and part of this was, of course, documented stuff. But since I visited Orchha so many times, I also came across people there who had their own bits to add to the various folk tales. And I spoke with people around there, and some lovely stories came up. And so I sort of, got together tied up all these different stories together, and put my research together and created the story. So the research needs very meticulous, it's a responsibility. You have to be very meticulous with what you're learning from the research and what you are conveying. So there has to be, that is where, you have to be very judicious about it. How you use the research and use it when you are telling a story. So,
and how much license does one have, or how much license to make it look like fiction versus how much of the history to keep intact? Yes. And I think the background, the authenticity, the actual events need to be just the way they are. The years or the actual timing of wars, etc., cannot be tampered with. But other than that, there is some amount of license with the fiction, and I think that's something to learn from you and this book, because keeping everything so authentic, it makes one believe that this must have been what it was, or this must have happened actually. So you touched upon 2 points, and one of them being that there are still aspirations attached with the name Rani Lakshmibai among the women there, and not just there, to a great extent all over India when there is a lot of courage or when there's bravery involved. And to some extent, as you said, there are parts or there are aspects of her that are unknown, like the part where she's supposed to be a very good, I mean, a politician actually, and a diplomat. So, but so coming to the question, what makes a book find its reader? So, according to me, it's the relevance or something that they can identify with. So, my question to you is in two parts. What is the relevance of Rani Lakshmibai today, and what do you identify with personally when you think of Rani Lakshmibai? When you think about her personally, has something changed when you wrote about her? Something in you changed?
Okay, I'll come back to the second part later about my personal equation with Rani Lakshmibai, because I really got to know her pretty well while I was writing. But before that, I would like to answer the first part of your question. I would like to read out something from an article I wrote for a journal a year ago. So, in this is book by a book called The History of the Indian Mutiny of 1857 and 8, written by K.N. Mallison. So in that, George Mallison writes that Rani Lakshmibai's force of character added to a splendid and inspiring courage that enabled her some months later to offer to the English troops under Sir Hugh Ross a resistance which made to a less able commander might even have been successful. The Rani's popularity also stemmed from the fact, now this is very important, that she created, and this is not just important, it is very relevant today, and I think politicians should take the cue from this, from her. Like you said that, she was, what kind of a politician was she? She was actually a politician. So they should remember this, that the Rani's popularity also stemmed from the fact that she created a homogeneous assortment of military as well as administrative officials, and above all, quoting Mallison, that is, had no qualms about introducing remarkably democratic notions by consulting with the representatives of the inhabitants of Jhansi over the measures to be taken and the policy to be adopted towards the British. So she was very inclusive. She was extremely inclusive of both her subjects as well as her staff, as well as her administrative staff, her military. This, according to historian Rainer Zerosh, was no less revolutionary that caste and religious differences, which are highly explosive issues in India even today, did not seem to be assigned much importance by her. This is very, very pertinent, very important. In fact, Zerosh has gone so far as to say that her form of government already anticipated important elements which would be contained in the preamble to the Indian Constitution of January 26, 1950. So Mallison says, she proved herself a most capable ruler, possessing considerable personal attractions, young, vigorous, and not afraid to show herself to the multitude. She gained a great influence over the hearts of the people. She treated her subjects and inferiors with a friendly dignity, which, while it repelled familiarity, so she knew where to draw the line, while it repelled familiarity, subdued even the rudest of the soldiers. So Rani Lakshmibai thus became a modern secular icon of the newly independent fledgling nation that found in her a reason to take pride in its sovereignty and multi-religious, multilingual, and multicultural ethnic diversity. At the same time, she took pride in her womanhood and maintained her feminine dignity. Now, there are some books, fiction books again on Rani Lakshmibai, which have again quoted her in a different light, she has been talked about as somebody, as a romantic figure, like she falls in love with a British officer and all that. And in another book, like she had actually hired a British lawyer to file her cases and, draft her letters to the British. And in one of those books, there has been a romantic, association between the two. So I do not agree with that. Fiction is all right, but like you said, you asked me how far can you go to take creative license. So I said, I have a responsibility towards my people, towards the people of India. I am an Indian. I have to maintain the dignity of that personality, and I have to be responsible enough not to tarnish her image in any way, because this is a lot of people look up to her, and I cannot play with people's emotions. She's an emotional figure for us. She's not just a historical figure, Pooja. She is an emotional figure. So I cannot, create something of my own out of my own imagination and say she was like this, she was like that. We do not want to see her like that. She may have been young. She has been attractive. Yeah, a lot of several British officers said she was very attractive. In one of the essays I read, in fact, that she used to tie her sari also very, though she was extremely dignified and very serious. But she tied her sari in a little sensual. It was a little sensuous the way she wore her sari and all that. But that's just sort of, vaguely sort of alluding that, yes, she had a good figure. Like one of the Britishers did comment that she had a handsome figure, and except for her voice, she was really attractive. So she was, after all, a woman, a queen. She was young. So these were fine. These are fine as long as you can put a stop there. But to mess around with a character and create a romantic, liaison with somebody else, I don't think I would do something like that.
No, and yet what you did was so beautiful. I think I have to compliment you on that. You read these few paragraphs from that essay, and though they must have been all to the point, absolutely right about what kind of a person she was, what type of a warrior or a queen that she was, and it was you who showed it to everyone. And here it was someone just telling. So that's the basics of, I think, story writing. Show, don't tell. And you showed it in the form of an example, in the form of a story, in the form of incidents, in the form of her aides who were just as brave as her and just as intelligent as her. And in speaking about them, or in and through their voice, were able to tell her story in a way that many of these wonderful historians could only have written about and would have been forgotten. But the characteristics that you brought out could have been exactly the same and well remembered. So I think this is one of the biggest learnings which I can kind of already understand from what you have done, and that is make history into something living and
relatable.
And relatable, so much so that all the characteristics are given their scenes. They're given their memories. They're given their space in your head. And they're not just words. So this show, don't tell, I think is the biggest thing that you could achieve, and give everyone a visual memory about how Rani Lakshmibai must have been. What is it for you? What is her memory, or in your mind, what is it? Who was Rani Lakshmibai, and how do you relate to her?
See, again, I'll just answer that. But before that, Rani Lakshmibai, we know, like the popular image is that of a warrior queen. But in the book, I have her friendship with Chandraki. I have shown it a bit, I would say a little sensitively. It's like two women friends, who is, one is status-wise and, in every possible way superior to the other, yet their bonding is so strong, that's the kind of female bonding that we all, desire to have with our female friends. So, and how one helps the other, and the other is ready to put down her life for a friend, friend whom she also considers a sovereign. So, that I have shown that aspect through their, as a woman, as a friend, as a vulnerable woman who has her weaknesses as well. She's not all about, great and glory and all that. She has her weaknesses as any other woman would. So sometimes she feels jealous, sometimes because when she hears of Chandraki wanting to get married, she doesn't want to let her go. She says, no, how can you do this to me? And then she relents and lets her go. So these are these nuances, these small characteristics of every woman that you and I also, among them have at any given point in our lives. So that is something I've tried to show her as a diplomat when she's drafting letters. She was brilliant, and the British were very scared of her. She knew how to be so precise. Her letters used to be. For me personally, I think what really my takeaway from Rani Lakshmibai's life, as I read about her, was her courage to stand up, her courage more than anything else to fight till the end. You know, she never gave up. मैं मेरी झांसी नहीं दूंगी. And even in the face of certain death, you know, she said, not only did she die, she said, I will not let them touch me. So she told her men, you know, to take her away from there and, you know, from the battlefield and cremate her so that the British don't lay their hands on her. So she never gave up. She lost everything one by one. She lost her child. She lost her husband. She lost her kingdom. She lost her sovereignty. You know, everything she lost. But she fought till the end. And what I liked about her was, though I wouldn't subscribe, I wouldn't be able to do something like her. Like a good politician, she first tried every other means to, you know, make peace with the British. But when everything else failed, she got onto her horse. I mean, she was on horseback and she was fighting with her sword. You know, Rani Lakshmibai's courage in the face of extreme danger and her will not to give up and to fight till death, you know, fight till the end, I would say, is something that I really admire. And I would say that I wouldn't say I always remember her at any, you know, vulnerable moment in my own life, but sometime or the other, I go back to her and I feel that, you know, she was just 24, and if she could take in so much at that time, you know, alone fighting for her kingdom, this is nothing, you know, I'm sure even I can do it. And the other thing I really like about her is her secularism, is her belief in other women, in the strength of women. She believed in the strength of a woman, you know, which is also something that I really admired in her, that, you know, not only was she brave herself, she created an entire regiment of female soldiers and trained them to fight and trained them aligning with her own principle of not giving up, you know. So
And also, as you said, that not keeping in mind caste and the kind of backgrounds they had, because that's what you try to reflect in your story as well, about this friendship that you had. So when a book is loved so much, and when you're so involved in it, when you know so much about the story, sometimes there can be a pressure and you know, if to write a prequel, for example. In this, there cannot be a sequel, perhaps, but there could be. But yeah, so there could be a lot of stories coming. And have you thought about them?
a sequel to Queen's
A
Last Will.
prequel. I would just say a prequel to it. A prequel to it.
The Queen's Last Salute. No, not really. Not really. No, I at the moment I have no such you know, plans. No such plan at the moment to probably write a prequel or even a sequel. I will be. I think for
And
the
yet-
time being, let us sort of invest in Rani Lakshmibai's, you know, persona and
Yeah.
the story of Queen's Last Salute.
But and yet writing that particular book, and I think that was the last book that was published, and you're already working on now on pure history book, right? Now you're actually writing history. So how did that transition happen? And was it very natural after having written The Queen's Last Salute, this natural transition from historic fiction to an actual historical writing? And what is it that you're writing about? We would love to know.
Actually, Queen's Last Salute came before the next immediate book after Queen's Last Salute was Anarkali and Salim, a retelling of Mughal-e-Azam, which is actually a digital, an ebook. It is not in a hard copy, which I would love to see in a hard copy, you know, in that form. So now it's been almost 4-5 years since I've written my last book. The one I'm working on currently is what I would term as narrative history. So it is history told in a storytelling fashion. like there's no fictional story in that. Now, this story is, I think it should be out sometime this year. And it is about a city. It is about a queen. I would have loved to write a romantic fiction, about this queen that I am writing about. But when I again started researching about her, I realized that there was a lot of controversy around her. Is around her, not was. There's a lot of controversy around her very existence. So that got me really intrigued, and I decided to research further. And since I love reading, I read and read and read, and so much more material came up, where there was an ongoing debate between historians, between academics, between writers, between journalists. So, and this debate, I found out, has been going on for the last 400 years, about a city, about its queen, which at perhaps this moment, I wouldn't like to divulge the name, but it is definitely about one of our beautiful cities, and about a queen around whom the city was built, for whom the city was built. So I would say that when I read that she is such a controversial figure, and so there has been so much material documented, and most importantly, which I think is a very important source of history, are the folk tales. So there are folk tales about her. There is talk about her through word of mouth, through cultural representations, various kinds of cultural representations. There's theater, there's dance, there's music, there's been, films, there's been, literature on her, about her. And yet, on the academic side, historians debate her.
So that just brings me to the question as to how have you been able to understand, judge, or differentiate, or even decide as to which historians, which perspectives you need to incorporate, and which of them you need to be away from? How do you judge? That must have been a learning in itself. And I think if you can tell our audience as to what makes them, what pieces of literature or what pieces of writing can be trusted upon as the truth, and which ones of them are more likely to be hearsay or more like. So how do you decide? If you can just share with us, how do you decide what is authentic and what isn't?
Pooja, you asked me a question which has sent me, has really created a lot of confusion in my life. For instance, see, let me say this at the outset that this is my first narrative history book. Okay, this is my first non-fiction book. So obviously I am apprehensive, like any true journalist would be, who's writing a non-fiction book. And I'm not a historian. So I was swamped with completely opposite points of view. So now,
because I think there's so much information available to us, not only through the internet, but through so many sources.
Books.
Yeah, books and the internet also. Yeah.
Of course, now we have digitized versions of books on the internet. We have, papers.
Yeah, so then that's how, it gets so overwhelming, like you said. So
yeah, it is very,
very
overwhelming. It is very, while you are researching, say, a particular title of the book, you realize that book, that particular, say you come across a particular title of a book in an academic paper. Now, when you go and start researching about that title, about that book that has been quoted, and you realize that the person who is quoted, the person who has been quoted has himself or herself quoted some other contemporary historian. So
referencing and further referencing.
You have to use your own discretion to understand whether how much of it is truth, how much of it is institutionalized, how much of it has been what do you call that? When kings ask you to, uh, I'm forgetting the word. Kings ask you to write about their own.
Stories or biographies.
Yeah, about their own biographies of their own time. Yes. So when they have you know, official chronicles of dynasties and kingdoms and rulers. So you have to match that with non-official chroniclers, because official chronicles can be quite patronizing, obviously quite
Biased. In their
biased.
favor.
Yes, and they might not reveal everything that goes against them. So you have to be very careful what you choose and what you don't, and corroborate and substantiate what you choose with facts. So that is one of the problems that I think any writer of history would face. That how to choose and how to decide whether or not something is authentic information or something that is just a hand-me-down story or something that has been officially commissioned. So
And then is it okay to like, have you done it for your upcoming book, like where you are really not sure, but you want to put it forth and you've read it maybe just as one of the sources or just two sources and haven't been able to corroborate it or to to confirm through multiple sources, and yet it's so interesting that you feel compelled to put it there. Then can you put in an opinion saying that this is why I feel, or this is the reason I feel it's true because it matches with this and that, and it's almost like a thesis or a kind of debate that you put on
if you
paper.
are quoting somebody and you do not agree with it, or there is a completely different quote on the same subject, I have put both, and sort of said myself that in my opinion, this holds more weight. A particular opinion holds more weight, or this matches more with that period of time, or whatever the subject is. So that, of course, that is a very, 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 natural. One of the biggest issues that you face when there are completely two differing
Right.
views on the same subject. So yes,
I think we'll have to wrap up soon, but
yes,
this has been such a beautiful conversation. But I just want to ask you, how do you feel should be I mean, how, if I wanted or one of our audience wanted to start writing, be an author, especially of historical fiction and maybe even narrative fiction, what do you think that they must be ready for, or what should they be prepared for, or what must they have in them? What kind of discipline does it entail? Can you tell us a bit about that?
see, first of all, a friend of mine, again, a professor friend of mine, asked me a few weeks back, Mopia, what kind of books how do you maintain, like when you're reading, like there was a friend who asked that I'm losing interest in reading. How can I get back to reading? So this friend of mine asked me that, what kind of books, hold your interest? So I said, how do you manage to keep reading? So I said, anything that I find interesting, irrespective of the genre in which the book has been written. Similarly, for writing, first of all, it is very important that the topic you are writing on, the subject you're writing on, be it fiction or non-fiction, you have to be passionate about that particular topic. You have to believe in that topic. You have to understand. I wouldn't say that will come later, but I will say that you have to be really interested, because you have to be interested in the topic, not just writing.
But Gopin, this is something so important, so relevant, and I'm so glad that even though it's come out at the end of our conversation, perhaps, but it's something very important, because in this generation where there's so much about likes and views and people wanting to be read, they just want to do what is being done. or they just want to write about topics that are being written about or topics that are being spoken about, and whether or not they're interested in them. I think this is very important, because if you're passionate, you can, you can create or
It's a lot
cause
of
that
work.
to come up in the reader.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the amount of work that will follow. You cannot carry on with that kind of research or work unless you're interested in the subject, So you have to be really passionate and really interested in order to follow, in order to research further, and you have to really get into the subject. You have to really.
And there must be down days, and there must be days with blocks, and how do you deal with those? Yeah, because I think because of the passion, it just lets you tide through those days. I guess.
Yes. I faced this while writing. Like I said, there was a 5-year gap while writing The Queen's Last Salute. And there are days when I can't write a single word. It's like I wouldn't even call it a writer's block. It's just that, I can't write. And then some days, 3-4 days consecutively I write. So I am not a very disciplined person to begin with. So it is not that I'm writing religiously, I'm writing 500 words every day and saying, okay. Like a lot of people have told me, whenever I've stumbled, upon such kind of hurdles, said, oh, but you write 500 words at least a day. I can't do that. I can't just write. I have to feel about what I'm writing. It has to come from within. And but there are writers who are very, very disciplined. Every day they will write, but I feel that, everybody works differently, they all have a different, everybody's temperament is different, their work style is different. So for me, it is like, sometimes I work for many days together, sometimes there are gaps. But one thing is sure, like Rani Lakshmibai, I will not give up till the end.
Oh wow! And I think I just cannot afford to add anything beyond that. And it's been a pleasure as always. It's so wonderful always to speak to you. I do learn so much, and I'm sure everyone must have learned so much. Be it about Rani Lakshmi Bai, about writing her story, about the people that were in her life, about portraying how she was in a form that can be remembered, and or about your journey, about the way you have written and grown as a writer, and how um, how history comes so naturally to you, your interest, the passion. I think this is the best way to learn something from something that's so beautifully written. And I would congratulate Raizoni and the bookathon event, that they've come up with something so creative and something in the form of a workshop, a project. And I just hope that the youngsters are all listening to this and getting a lot out of this. And thank you so much. I think right from as to what Mopia said, the baseline is never give up. And thank you so much, Mopia.
It's been my absolute honor to participate in this, and I would really like to thank the Raisoni Group and OCLF team for inviting me. And as always, like you said, it's always a pleasure to converse with you, Pooja. And it is so interactive and so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. And once again, thank you to the JOTI group, as well as to the Raizoni Foundation. And thank you so much.